Our own David Nazar has much more. Welcome. I'm sure, I don't know, was she okay with this interview?
It took a while to get the interview, but she was very gracious about the interview, Elizabeth and Rick. But where to begin? That's the question. DWP gets this new computer system about 2 years ago to try and help collect unpaid bills and fix their antiquated billing system. The agency invests about $200 million, and what happens? It fails, producing tens of thousands of incorrect bills that were sent out to customers, with the utility company ultimately losing out on more money. Then there are the two seemingly secretive nonprofit trusts called the Joint Training Institute and the Joint Safety Institute. Now, they're basically created to help improve labor relations, whatever that is, with the DWP's largest union, IBEW Local 18. Well, Mayor Garcetti and City Hall are still trying to figure out how those nonprofits spent more than $40 million of your ratepayer money over the last 10 years. Now, reports do show trustees and folks spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in recent years on things like meals, fuel costs, and travel expenses. Well, also speaking of money, there was the misappropriation of more than $4 million in public funds by a DWP audio-visual technician who's being prosecuted by the DA for basically rigging contracts and then giving them to friends for kickbacks. All this while your rates are going to increase again. Here is my exclusive interview with DWP General Manager Marcie Edwards. Marcie Edwards, General Manager of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Thank you so much for being here.
Appreciate it, David. Thanks for the invite.
It's been a revolving door of general managers in the last few years. You're the 7th. How have things been going so far?
We're making steady headway in repairing the issues associated with our customer service billing system. They rolled out a system that was basically 40 years old. The integration aspects of it were not what we were promised, and it created some problems for our customers in terms of delayed bills, some inaccurate bills, long call wait times. We have 98.5% of our bills all going out on time, accurate at this point. Call wait times were 40 minutes. They've been under 3 minutes for the last 2 months. So I think incremental progress is being made on a variety of fronts. We have, with respect to the billing system, said that customers will be, to the extent they were impacted, reimbursed 100 cents on the dollar. It's always a bit frustrating with anyone who sends a bill to your door.
I talk to so many folks in Los Angeles who basically tell me they're livid because maybe perception is reality, but they believe their rates are continually increasing and they feel like they're being price gouged.
The largest portion of what people are charged for are the commodities, buying, creating electricity, buying and paying the price for imported water. Imported water has skyrocketed in price as a result of the drought. As a result, those increasing prices for water are passed through onto customers' bills.
Talking about passing along a cost, your agency has about $6 billion in revenue. I mean, that's a huge surplus. Now, of course, you need to do about a $1 billion replumbing of the infrastructure. Why, though, do we as a ratepayer have to have our bill increased and pay for that? Why not use your surplus and your revenue to pay for it yourself?
It's a very good question. Twofold. A lot of what you see as revenue on the books are in constrained funds that can only be used for a single use, like the decommissioning of a coal plant. You're talking about billions of dollars that need to sit in those funds. Secondly, we're what we call a $6 billion a year industry, but that's money coming in and money coming out. It's not building these large reserve funds. We plan to take the $1.3 billion that our planned rate increase will raise, use that to borrow money, and leverage that into $17 billion in projects.
About 10 years ago, two nonprofits were created here, a Joint Training Institute, a Joint Safety Institute. In the last decade, $40 million have been spent by these nonprofits, $4 million a year in our ratepayer money. We don't know where the money is. Can you account for that? Do you have an eye on the books? Do you know what's happening?
The trusts themselves, though, it's important to understand the way they were structured is that labor and management have an equivalent vote. So management is not able to make changes to the trusts without labor's agreement or without reopening the contract between DWP and IBEW and negotiating changes. Both of the trusts have been audited now by the city's chief administrative officer as well as the city controller. All of those audit recommendations are being reviewed.
And I get all of that, and I understand that, and I hear you. Yet with that said, aren't you just curious as to where $40 million has gone over the last 10 years and what it has been spent on? You've heard your critics of DWP call this agency a corrupt agency.
All of that information is available in the audits. What the real focus is scrutiny. And here's an area that the labor and management trustees disagree. I would prefer full public scrutiny. You know, I'm a government employee, I'm trained that way. But my counterparts don't agree. That issue is being litigated, and I'm hoping for some clarification of that from the courts.
Why do you believe the union, and namely Brian Darcy, the union leader, is so resistant to opening the books and saying, here's where all the money went?
I would hate to speculate on what Brian is thinking or choosing to do. I just know their position is that those are separate institutes, separate bylaws. I believe they see them as being funded by money that was in lieu of a rate increase to DWP employees. But again, I can't channel their position. I just know we differ on the issue of public transparency.
The bad rap on this agency has been lack of transparency, lack of oversight, lack of accountability.
We have multiple audits that are being conducted throughout the company on any given day. We have a ratepayer advocates office. We have a variety of outside consultants commissioned by either council members or outside groups that review our books. We do annual audits.
One thing that cannot be argued is there certainly has been a lack of leadership and qualified general managers here.
DWP is a very, very complex place, and I would be lying if I said I need 8 more people doing my work to really start to make a difference more rapidly. But I think things are changing. The biggest issue for me is DWP has been an engineering culture for its entire existence. They build projects, they analyze things. Pumping out water and electric to the customers was basically almost a secondary issue, and it can't be anymore. The company has to run based on what the customers want to see from it. What type of service levels, what type of options do they want and do they need? That's the culture change that we're embarking on.
Where do you believe the disconnect is between this agency and its customers?
I think the disconnect comes from a bureaucracy that is having difficulty developing the agility and flexibility to move into the next century. The culture change needs to shift to be customer-centric. The technology needs to more greatly embrace the push to renewable power and new technologies. We literally have to reform the way in which DWP does business. And really, that's what I came here to do.
Well, listening to Marcie Edwards, she just might get some of that reform done. Now, for all the problems over at DWP, it's only fair as a fair reporter to point out some of the positives Marcie talked to me about. So let's take a look. For starters, Marcie compared DWP and to other utility companies, and she says it has some of the lowest rates in the state of California. The reason your bill sometimes seems too high is they bill every 2 months, not monthly. So basically it's a double bill, and DWP bundles everything together, including water and power, trash, sanitation, user fees. Also, Marcie says the agency ranks in the top 25% in the nation for what's known as reliable power providers. In other words, quality and reliable service, she says. Also interesting to note, DWP has hired about 130 new customer service reps in the last year, and the agency has established paperless payment options. And finally, DWP is continuing its effort to get away from coal purchases, Rick and Elizabeth, because ultimately their goal is to be 100% renewable power. Lofty goal.
Let me say this, though.
You know, like I think 40% of their power now comes from coal.
Right.
But also, I understand the bundling user fees, but I think that's where it can become less transparent because you don't see it as much if you're being overcharged. And that's kind of it can be construed and seen as a sneaky way of, you know, throwing in an extra fee or not. But if there are annual audits, I mean, does that mean you can go online and see what they're doing?
I'm hoping we'll be able to see all this information. Many folks have tried to get public records requests and get all this information. They're telling me that this information is accruing and we're going to be seeing all of this. I'm very curious to find out what exactly is in there.